What's up, world, and welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like here at the Real News Network. I'm Jared Ball in Baltimore. For some, the month of August carries special significance as a time to commemorate, study, and advance the radical traditions in the Black liberation struggle. The Black August tradition originated in the concentration camps of California to honor fallen freedom fighters Jonathan Jackson, George Jackson, William Christmas, James McLean, and Qatari Gaulden. It is also a time to reflect upon the many important moments in Black history associated with militant rebellion, such as the beginnings of the Haitian Revolution, the origins of the Underground Railroad, the revolts attempted by Nat Turner and Gabriel Prosser, but also the birthday of people like Marcus Garvey. Black August is also a time to fast, refocus on commitments to free or at least communicate with political prisoners, and to further organize for political struggle. However, what is at times ignored is the particular role hip-hop continues to play in advancing the ideas associated with Black August. To discuss some of that is Mr. DaveyD, a legendary journalist, DJ, and hip-hop historian. He now joins us from his home in Oakland, California. DaveyD, welcome to I Mix What I Like and the Real News Network.
Thanks for having me on, Jared. How are you?
I'm as good as could be expected, my man, and better to have you with us. So again, thank you for joining us. I definitely want to have you to comment a little bit on some of these lesser-known aspects of hip-hop's relationship to this radical and militant Black August tradition. And I know that you're perfectly situated to do that. So let me just ask you from the top to tell us a little bit about that relationship.
Well, I think there's two ways to look at it. I mean, one, if you look at just Black August as a concept of connecting with our radical militant struggle, I think hip-hop has always had that relationship from the very beginnings with Africa Bambaataa, the Zulu Nation. There was always an understanding with people, especially with Bambaataa, that there were these freedom struggles and that the role that he was trying to fashion with the Zulu Nation and just himself was one to be a continuum. That doesn't mean that they necessarily took on all the tenets, didn't mean that they did all the activities, whether it's the free breakfast program or picking up the gun and having patrols, but it was definitely one in which people weren't going to turn the other cheek. And in fact, I lived in a neighborhood where the Zulu Nation, before, also known as the Black Spades, would at different times surround the police stations and toss Molotov cocktails at them in the aftermath of particular incidents. So I think that's important to understand, that there was that continuum of knowing that oppression needs to be met with some sort of forceful resistance. Now, when you talk about the age of records and, hip hop becoming a thing that centers around rap itself and you have rap artists, I think there's always been that connection with artists, whether it's Boots from the Coup, whether it's Dead Prez, whether it's Public Enemy, X-Clan, or any number of groups that have either referenced political prisoners, they have talked about the freedom struggles, or there's been this direct connection in the case of Tupac and Mutulu Shakur, who's his father, along with his brother Mercedes. There's been those direct connections where people are saying, look, you are artists, and as an artist, we need you to continue to raise up the issues that have underlined the freedom struggle. You've also had very focused campaigns. So, for example, people forget that hip-hop was involved very intimately with the freeing of Geronimo Jajaga. It was right here in Oakland that there were huge concerts that came about with political education from former Black Panthers that featured artists that would then go on the stage and then try to raise money or awareness of him. So I think that's happened. There's been campaigns around Mumia, freeing him. In fact, there's been a couple of compilation albums. So I think, hip-hop is reflective of society in general. There are people, whether it's the Mos Defs, now Yasin Bey, Talib Kweli's, I'm skipping names right now, but there's a large number of folks that have been involved with trying to bring attention to political prisoners.
Well, if I can, just to clarify very quickly, just to back up for a quick second, I know you didn't mean to say this, but just in case people heard it incorrectly or weren't clear, Mutulu Shakur, the former Black Panther Party member, Black Liberation Army member, was not Tupac's father, but he was his stepfather and associated closely with the family.
Yeah.
Just to be clear. And then there was,
they referred to him as his father.
Oh, no question. Political father, no question. Just not biological. I just want to make sure people understood that Assata Shakur is also not Tupac's mother, but connected politically through their relationship with the Black Panther Party, through his godmother, through Afeni Shakur, Tupac's actual biological mother. Absolutely.
I just want to make sure we're clear because Pac himself, who I knew, had referred to him as
no question. Absolutely. I just want to make sure people understand that the reference is one of political familial friendship as opposed to actual biological family ties. But also to follow up on your point that if we look even at the work of my comrades in the Malcolm X grassroots movement, Dream Hampton's great documentary that documents the long tradition of that organization's relationship with Black August specifically, and building bridges between artists and political prisoners and the diaspora's radical traditions as well. Could you comment a little bit on that? But even more specifically, I'd even want you to go back and talk about what I know you've done some of the seminal reporting on with Paradise Gray, going back to something I've asked you about millions of times, but that legendary Latin Quarters meeting, which I think sets the tone for the direction hip-hop was trying to go in versus what it has been encouraged to go in, but also underscores this relationship to militant radical struggle that you've been talking about so far.
Right. Just to comment before I get into that whole thing at the Latin Quarters, I think it's important what you mentioned, that there were these campaigns, and I mentioned two, and you mentioned a third, with the Dream Hamptons and Malcolm X grassroots movement and all those organizations having a very focused, very strategic, very well thought out attempt to connect with artists and bring those two worlds together, the militant activist world, the liberation world, with the recording industry, and raise those issues, which is very, very important, not just with artists, but also with people writing and doing whatever. I should also mention during that time you had people like Paris, who was here from the Bay Area, that actually went down to Cuba, met with Assata, sat with Castro, brought those messages back. And
by the way, Paris has a new album coming out on September 11th of this year, and the first track from it that I saw, The Night of the Long Knives, is directly in this tradition that we're talking about. So but please go ahead,
Now, with the Latin Quarters, and Paradise Gray is somebody to really speak on this. Paradise, a former member of the Black Spades and Zulu Nation member, ran one of the biggest nightclubs in hip-hop, which is called the Latin Quarter. And he was the person that was in charge of booking the acts and setting the schedule as to who would perform and not perform. During that time, this is in the mid-'80s, there was the anti-apartheid movement. There was also a movement to divest, and there was also an issue around the gold jewelry that people were wearing. There was tensions between Black New Yorkers and Koreans, who many people felt had exuded racial behavior towards them. That being said, there was a number of meetings that was held at the Latin Quarters, which involved Paradise and his partner, the late Lumumba Carson, who was the son of Sonny Carson. They were a member of an organization called Black Watch. They brought together everybody from the Jungle Brothers to KRS, whoever was the hot artist at that time. They had a number of meetings and decided to change the value system within hip-hop. And part of that value system was demoting the value of gold and and not allowing anybody to perform at the Latin Quarters wearing gold, but to replace that gold with leather medallions that had the continent of Africa sewn into it. And so it was the start of that campaign, which of course led to everybody sporting the African medallions, and really opened up at least the aspect of Afrocentricity within hip hop, which was later reflected in a lot of songs. But that that whole trend didn't happen by accident. It was a very deliberate campaign. And so again, hip hop has always had these long campaigns, and that campaign of wearing the African medallions comes on the heels of another campaign that hip hop was involved in, and that was the Boycott of Sun City campaign, which many artists of note were involved in. They were doing those records, they were bringing attention to it, and they were reflecting them in songs and videos. I think a lot of people forget, for example, Queen Latifah's song, Ladies First. If you actually look at the video, it's a video that really speaks to freeing South Africa. But I bring all that up to say that at that time in the mid-'80s, there was political consciousness was raised. Folks were using their platforms as artists to speak truth to power, and they were focused on freeing our people, whether they were here in the United States or whether they were under colonial rule abroad, in this case, South Africa.
DaveyD, thank you very much for joining us in this segment of I Mix What I Like here at The Real News and helping us understand this relationship of hip-hop that hip-hop still has with the militant struggles and histories and traditions in Black history. Thank you very much for joining us here at The Real News.
Thank you very much, Jared, and peace out.
And thank you for joining us here at The Real News as well. And for all involved, I'm Jared Ball here in Baltimore. And as always, as Fred Hampton used to say to you, we say peace if you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody, and we'll catch you in the whirlwind.